Hey guys, welcome back. We are just over a month away from the 2022 hunting season here in Michigan. So in today's video, I wanted to talk about our pre-season hunting checklist, what we are doing on our property to make sure that we are ready for the upcoming season. And most years, you want to make sure that you're getting your to-do list wrapped up sometime by the end of August or early September. And we just use the long weekend of Labor Day weekend to make sure that our property is ready for the upcoming hunting season. And the reason that we're using Labor Day weekend as that marker is because it is a longer weekend and because we like to give the property as much time as possible to rest prior to hunting it for the first time. The more time you can give the deer the property to themselves, the more relaxed they're going to be and the more predictable the movement's going to be when you hunt the property for the first time. So if you're waiting to hunt your property until mid to late October, you're giving your property about a month and a half of rest before hunting it for the first time. Even if you're hunting your property on the opener, October 1st, you're still giving your property a full month to rest, a full month to settle down prior to hunting it for the first time. So let's dive right into our preseason hunting checklist. And for the most part, these are in no particular order, but the last two items that we're going to talk about on this list are the last two things that we're doing on our property before we're leaving for at least a month. The first thing that you guys want to make sure that you're doing prior to the hunting season is checking every single stand location. And you want to make sure that you're doing this for a few reasons. The first is the most important, and you're checking everything that's safety related. So all the straps on your stands, whether that you have a lifeline or a safety belt on your stand, the ratchet straps that are holding your stand to the tree, you want to make sure that you're double checking everything from a safety standpoint. That way you have nothing to worry about when you're hunting that stand location for the first time. And this is something that's important to do every single season, whether it's an old stand or a new stand, but it's a little bit more important to check those old stands, because if you just hung a stand, a few weeks ago, the chances that those straps have gone bad or they're a little bit too tight, that's fairly low. But the stand that's been hanging in the woods for several years, there's a good chance that that tree has started to swallow that stand or swallow the straps, and you might need to go up there and kind of loosen it up and then re-tighten. The last thing that you want to have happen is to have that tree expand, put too much pressure on that strap, and then when you step on that stand for the first time, that's just enough for that strap to give way. You hear about these accidents every single season where a hunter has fallen out of his tree stand, whether it's he's not strapped in or maybe he didn't double check the straps on the stand. Either way, regardless of what it was, these things can be prevented. So just make sure that you're double checking everything safety related on every single stand location, especially if they've been in the woods for several seasons. And while you're at the stand, while you're double checking all the safety items, make sure that you have everything there from a convenience standpoint as well. Make sure that you have your bow hoist rope, make sure that you have your bow hanger. I also like to have 2 additional hangers for my backpack and an additional hanger for my camera. I have a little handheld camera that I bring with me in the woods every single season. And it's really nice to hang that camera on its own hook. That way, if I see a deer, I can grab the camera as opposed to having to dig through my bag to find the camera. Another thing that you want to make sure that you're doing at each individual stand location is evaluating your shooting lanes. Now, this is more important on those new stand locations as you have not cut the shooting lanes yet. But even with those older stand locations, over time, vegetation can start to encroach on your shooting lanes, and that might need to get cut back. So try to remember that while you're double checking every stand location from both a safety perspective and a convenience perspective, you're also evaluating your shooting lanes. And remember, with shooting lanes, bigger is not always better. You want to make sure that you're leaving some cover around your stand. The next thing that you want to make sure that you're doing, and you can do this at the same time as double checking every single stand location, and that's double checking your access to every single stand location. You want to make sure that you still have very clear access to every single stand location prior to hunting your property for the first time. We get some pretty good thunderstorms throughout the summer here in Michigan, and there's a good chance that during one of those storms that a few trees came down on your property. And you just don't want to have one of those trees come down over your access path, and the first time that you figure that out is when trying to access your property for the first time during the season. depending on the size of the tree that came down or whatever the obstruction is that's in the way of your access, that could push you into a deer area. That could push you into a food plot, a bedding area, a deer trail, and that is not what you want to do if you're trying to keep your property pressure free and most of your scent towards the outside of your property. So make sure that you're double checking your access to each stand location prior to hunting your property for the first time. Along with double checking on our access to make sure there's nothing blocking our way to our stand locations, the next thing that we're doing on our checklist prior to letting our property sit for the last time prior to the hunting season, we are double checking on each individual deer trail as well. Just like those trees can come down and block our access and push us into deer areas, the same thing can happen if a tree comes down and blocks a deer trail. You want to make sure that your deer trails are open so that the movement on your property remains consistent. This is actually one of the ways that we can influence deer movement on our property, by dropping trees. We can drop a tree to push deer one way or the other. So if you have a tree, a big one, that falls over top of one of your trails, that's likely going to push the deer around that tree. And depending on where your stand location is in relation to that downed tree, that could push the deer just out of range or away from your stand location. And you just don't want to have that happen after putting so much time and effort into working on the habitat improvements on your property. So just make sure that you're walking every single deer trail, and this will take time, but it's worth it, just to make sure that the movement that you've created on your property remains predictable and consistent throughout the hunting season. And while we're walking the deer trails around our property, the next thing that we want to make sure that we're double checking on prior to the hunting season is our bedding areas. And you're going to probably sense a theme here, and a lot of it has to do with storm damage, but we want to make sure that the bedding areas on our property have not been damaged. So we want to make sure that the escape routes or the entry and exit routes to each bedding area remain open, that no trees have fallen down to block those escapes. And we want to make sure that we're checking on the individual beds that we've made within the bedding area. If branches have fallen down, little twigs, not so much a problem, but big branches, big sticks, if they're laying in those individual beds, those deer are not going to lay on those sticks. Now they might find another spot within the bedding area to bed down, but you've spent the time to create these individual beds. You might as well make sure that they are stick-free and they are ready for the hunting season. The more attractive you can make these bedding areas on your property, clean beds, multiple entrances, multiple escapes, the greater the chances the deer are going to use them during the hunting season. Another thing that we like to do while we're walking the deer trails around our property is we like to double check on our mock scrapes and our water holes. With mock scrapes, the first thing you want to make sure that you're double checking on is your licking branch. Whether you're using a branch, whether you're using a vine, is that going to last the entire season? Depending on your area, depending on how many bucks you have, the age of the bucks, they can be pretty rough with these licking branches, and from time to time they do need to be replaced. So just make sure that you're taking the time to double check those licking branches, whether you're using an oak limb, a beech limb, or a hanging vine. You just don't want to end up at the pre-rut and have these bucks either rip down or destroy your previous licking branches because you didn't take the time to replace it. The next thing that we're doing with our scrapes is we are just opening them up. We are removing the leaves, exposing the bare dirt. For the most part, during the summer months, the deer are not doing much scraping activity. They are using the scrapes all the time to communicate with one another, but they're not doing much scraping. So over the summer, a lot of these scrapes can get filled in with leaves, and we just want to make sure that we are removing those leaves, exposing the bare dirt, just to act more as a visual cue for the deer. We do get some scraping activity in September, not nearly as much as mid to late October, but we do get some scraping in October. So we just want to make sure that we are opening these scrapes back up for the bucks. Moving on down the list, and for this next one, you can do this at the same time as double checking on your scrapes, and that's double checking on your water holes. And for our water holes, all we're really doing is making sure that our critter stick is still in our water hole and that our water holes are topped off. And for the most part, I would say that a majority of our water holes stay fairly full from just collecting rainwater. It's sprinkling right now, and again, I would say that we don't have to fill up most of our water holes, and then they stay fairly full from just collecting the rainwater because we dig them just below grade. And that's saying something this year, because I think in June we received an inch of rain, July another inch of rain, and the water holes, they stayed fairly full. Just make sure that you're using at least a 100-gallon stock tank, you're burying it below grade, and if you're topping that off prior to hunting season, you should not have to go back during the season to fill up your water hole. And that brings us to the last two things that we're doing on our property prior to letting it sit for at least a month. And the first one that we'll talk about here is making sure that our trail cameras are set up. And with our trail cameras, we're really just doing two things. The first thing we're doing is we're putting in brand new Energizer lithium batteries. During the off season, I don't really care what batteries I'm using. For the most part, I'm just buying the cheapest batteries that I can find. Because we're on the property a lot, we have opportunities to change the batteries a lot. And I don't really care that I'm on my property a lot during the off season. However, that's very different than during the hunting season. During the hunting season, I do not want to be on my property for any reason other than hunting. That includes changing batteries on my cameras, changing cards on my cameras. So I want to make sure that the batteries that I'm putting in my cameras are going to last a long time. And that's where the Energizer lithium batteries comes in. These batteries are fairly expensive, but they do last a very long time and operate in low temperatures. So I make sure that each one of my trail cameras has Energizer lithium batteries to make sure that I do not have to go out there and change the batteries mid-season. We also want to make sure that we're putting in fresh SD cards in each one of our cameras. And for me, I like to run a lot of my cameras in video mode, so I make sure to use as big of an SD card as that particular camera can hold, whether that's a 32 gigabyte card or a 64 gigabyte card. I want to make sure that that thing can hold as much space as possible so I do not have to go back there and change the card. I just let them sit out there for as long as possible until I hunt that particular location for the first time, and then I will change the card. And depending on the year and the location of a particular camera, I might not get back there to change the card until the first week of November. There are also times where I've let a camera sit all season long. So I need to make sure that that camera has batteries that are going to last through the entire season, and they also have the space to store all the pictures and videos that could accumulate throughout the season. So again, I make sure that I use Energizer lithium batteries and the biggest SD card that that particular camera can support. And guys, the last thing that we're doing on our property before letting it sit is we are broadcasting our cereal rye into our food plots, prior to the next rain event. So this can vary a little bit. It's not always Labor Day weekend. It could be a little bit later. It really just depends on when that next rain event is around Labor Day weekend. But we want to make sure that we are broadcasting our cereal rye into our food plots as late as possible, while at the same time giving our property as much time as possible to rest prior to hunting it for the first time. And the sweet spot for us has always been around Labor Day or that first rain event after Labor Day weekend. Deer prefer rye when it's younger, so you don't want to be seeding it in early August with the rest of your food plot blend because it won't be as attractive during the hunting season. So again, you want to be waiting as long as possible to put your rye down so it's more attractive during the hunting season. But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're seeding it early enough to give your property enough rest prior to hunting it for the first time. Also, with putting the rye down, this is one of the activities that I look forward to the most, mainly because the entire family can get involved. My kids really like helping, whether that's with habitat improvements with dad or gardening with mom. They really like helping. And one of the habitat improvements that they really like to do is plant food plots. And one of the easiest things for them to do and help with is throw down cereal rye because they can't really mess it up. I'm not really as concerned with the seeding rate of the rye as opposed to other seed blends, brassica for example. If they want to go a little heavy on the rye in one spot or another, it's not really going to hurt anything. It's just fun having the family and the kids out there to help cross off the last item on our preseason hunting checklist. But guys, that's pretty much going to wrap it up for today's video on what we're doing prior to the hunting season. If you guys have anything else that you like to do on your property prior to the hunting season, I'd love to know about it. If you do have any questions, please drop those in the comment section below. I'll get back to those as soon as I can, and we will see you guys in the next video.